So first of all, I'm very humbled to be able to present at such an important conference and also at a topic that has been very close to my heart since my teenage life. But at the same time, I must also acknowledge that I'm very nervous. That's something unusual because I'm not presenting in front of one of my teachers or two, but a room full of them. And an interesting part is that most of my core arguments... Yes, it is not. My core arguments come from their own work, but whatever shortcomings are there during this presentation, it's on me and not on them. So before starting, I would like to say that in today's presentation, I will try to analyze the theological development of the concept of Mahdi or Qayyim within Shi'i Islam and paying special or particular attention to its articulation in Ismaili theory of imamat. I argue that the idea was originally centered on the belief in a divinely guided concealed imam who would appear and initiate the qiyāma, and this notion first became important in Ismaili theology during the concealment of Muhammad bin Ismail through a cyclical interpretation of history. Nonetheless, it persisted even after imams re-emerged from concealment. Sometimes some of these imams also defied the earlier Ismaili cyclical theory and expectations associated with the Qayyim. By situating the doctrine of the Qayyim within Ismaili theology and political contexts, I will try to analyze the enduring significance of the Qayyim in shaping Ismaili history and theology. First, as a source of tension for the imams to navigate their authority while present among their followers, and also as a catalyst for transformative events such as the Qiyāma declaration at Alamut, which redefined the political, religious, spiritual, and communal dynamics of the Ismaili community. Through comparative chronology of key events, I argue that there is a recurring sequence and underlying declaration of the Qiyāmat. These include the concealment of the Imam, the anticipation and preparation for the Mahdi or the Qayyim to reappear, the declaration of the Qiyāma upon the Imam's reappearance, and then finally the eventual reinterpretation of the Qiyāma to consolidate allegiance to the present or the next Imam. One of the key challenges the Muslim community faced after the death of Prophet Muhammad was the question of his succession. With his death, Muslims struggled to agree on what type of leadership they must establish. The characteristic, values, the very message that Prophet Muhammad had brought with him had indeed raised the bar for a charismatic leader among Muslims, and it was difficult for Muslims to agree on who was the most deserved, qualified, or appointed leader to lead the entire Muslim community after Prophet Muhammad. It's therefore no surprise that succession to Prophet Muhammad created a vacuum, something that remains a dispute in the Muslim community to this day. Within this context, various theories of leadership started taking shape. One of the most famous among these theories was the idea of a rightly guided ruler, the restorer of God's religion, or the Mahdi, as he was referred to, who would establish justice on earth. This was something that no successor of Prophet Muhammad had established. In this search for the just ruler or the Mahdi, sometimes also called the Qayyim, Muslim communities turned to the many Muslim rulers who claimed they were the Mahdi. The late Professor Medlang, who has provided an interesting and detailed accounts on this matter, argues that the title of Mahdi was in fact first applied to the Prophet of Islam himself, to Imam Hussein as Mahdi ibn al-Mahdi, to Al-Walid, the Umayyad caliphs, and so on. In such a politically charged environment, there were Mahdi claimants in every corner of the Muslim polity. It was this very widespread and flexible doctrine of the Mahdi that enabled the Abbasid and the Fatimids to establish their empires. Among the many Muslim communities, Shi'i in general and Ismailis in particular, from the very early decades of Islam, formed a sophisticated revolutionary movement motivated by the same belief in the Savior, the Mahdi or the Qayyim, who would come and restore justice on earth. Within Shi'ism, different groups ascribe different requirements, roles, and functions to the Mahdi or the Qayyim, but one common belief among all Shi'i Muslim communities was that his appearance was connected with eschatological events, that he will restore justice on earth, implement the law of God again, or sometimes it was also believed that he will abrogate the Sharia and begin a new era. beginning with Al-Mukhtar's Tawabin movement, who had started to avenge Imam al-Husayn's death. And after many failed attempts by other Shi'i groups, the first Shi'i group that finally succeeded in establishing a Shi'i imamat or empire was the Ismailis, who founded the Empire dynasty in 909. What is known about the emergence of this movement is that it was also formed or established in the name of an eschatological figure, Muhammad ibn Ismail, the grandson of the famous Shi'i Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq. However, this was not the first nor the last time or event that was inspired by the concept of Ismaili prophetology, eschatology, or Ismaili theory of imamat. Throughout Ismaili history, groups within Ismailis emerged and made different claims by drawing motivation from these eschatological doctrines. One such event that happened in the famous castle of Alamut in the year 1164, which is the subject of today's presentation, was one such among many, where the ruler of the time, Asanallah Zikr Salam, declared or initiated the long-awaited qiyāma or resurrection. I will talk about this shortly. But since this is a very complex event in the history of Ismaili Shi'ism, I aim to situate the declaration of the resurrection at Alamut in the larger Ismaili context of imamat. Resurrection, as in the general Muslim concept, refers to, using of course the Quran and Hadith literature, could be traced back to the Prophet of Islam and the very first message of Islam itself. And it has been interpreted in few different ways, but the general Muslim view has been that it refers to the day of judgment when the dead shall rise again and receive the reward of punishment for their deeds in this world. In Ismaili Shi'ism, the resurrection is also interpreted or understood in a symbolic way. This could be because of the understanding and definition of time by the Ismailis. The Ismailis from the beginning of 8th century interpreted time not in a linear way, but in a cyclical way. Thus, the Ismailis interpreted the current epoch of our time to begin with Noah as the first Natiq speaker prophet, which continues to Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Prophet Muhammad, which was expected to finally end with Muhammad ibn Ismail, not only as the 7th final Natiq speaker prophet, but also as the Qaʻim or the Mahdi, as it was referred at that time. Muhammad bin Ismail was expected to rise and establish justice, as well as reveal the ta'wil of not just the Holy Quran, but also earlier revelations. However, as happens with most eschatological predictions or events, Muhammad ibn Ismail did no such thing during his lifetime. Later Ismailis argued that it was because of what they call Dawr al-Satar or concealment period, in which the Ismaili Imams were hidden or veiled from the general public. Almost 97 years after Muhammad bin Ismail's death, Abdullah al-Mahdi claimed to be the Imam and Mahdi and was declared Caliph in Africa. He began his reign by rejecting the earlier eschatological doctrine and Mahdiship or Qayyimship of Muhammad ibn Ismail as the last and final Qayyim. Some of Muhammad bin Ismail followers, such as the Karamatis, did not accept the Imamat of al-Mahdi and continued to believe in Muhammad bin Ismail as the last and final Natiq, and eventually declared qiyāma in Bahrain in 931. Beginning with al-Mahdi, the Fatimid Imam Caliphs struggled to bring a balance between the eschatological expectation, which had helped them build the dynasty, and their own position in the dynasty as Imam and Caliphs. The first of these challenges came from none other than the Fatimid Da'i Abu Abdullah Ash'ari, who was relegated in his political role. An act also prompted the Da'i to question the very claim of the Imam to be the Mahdi or the Qayyim. He was executed a year later. A year after the Da'i's execution, a section of the Kutuma warriors rebelled against the Imam Caliph al-Mahdi, arguing that a certain Qadu was a prophet and the true Mahdi. As Faris Guilon and others before him have argued, it was perhaps these incident that Abdullah al-Mahdi designated his successor and named him Muhammad bin Abdullah after himself, attempting to divert the messianic hopes raised by the daʿwa on himself. This was in confirmation with the prophetic hadith that the Mahdi or the Qayyim will bear the name and characteristics of the Prophet of Islam himself. The Mahdi claimant, however, continued to pose a threat to the Fatimid legitimacy within and outside their dawa. sorry. Imam Caliph al-Muizz, during Imam Caliph al-Muizz's time, just wanted to show you one more thing here. As you can see here, the name of the Imams in black were like supposed to be the expected Mahdis or the Qa'ims, first with Muhammad ibn Ismail, and then in the cyclical story it would go until I've tried to come up till like Alamut period, in which like 7 means like 1421, and then 28 were expected to be the Qa'ims in the Ismaili theology, but the historical political Mahdi did not follow the cyclical theory of Ismailis, and instead of Muhammad bin Ismail, the 11th Imam al-Mahdi and his son al-Qayyim were the Mahdi and the Qayyim. And then during the Fatimid period, instead of like Imam al-Mu'tadi, al-Hakim was believed to be the Mahdi or the Qayyim by the Druze. And then at Alamut's time, instead of Shamsuddin, who came later, Hassan too was not even part of this cyclical, like theory of 777. He did not confine to that and declared qiyāma. During the Imam Caliph al-Muizz's time, and after him during al-Aqim's time, the signs of eschatological event started appearing again. During al-Hakim's time, the Druze, led by Hamza Labab and Akram and al-Darazi, not only preached the abrogation of the Sharia as was expected with the coming of the Qayyim, but also started preaching the divinity of al-Hakim and his predecessors, which later led to the foundation of what later became a separate religion called the Druze. While al-Muizz's theological reinterpretation of the idea of Qayyim proved fruitful to spread the Ismaili daʿwa outside the Fatimid dynasty and helped him to win over Karamatis and influential Karamati Ismaili da'is, including Abu Yaqub al-Sijistani. It's therefore very important to read Abu Yaqub al-Sijistani's working. It's important to know whether he wrote it before becoming a Fatimid Ismaili or whether he was a Karmati when he wrote those. It's also important, it's also helped the Imam Caliph to al-Muizz to unite the different Ismaili communities who had theological differences. In the case of al-Aqim, however, the political and theological reinterpretation took a different form, one in which al-Aqim's successor not only took the title of al-Zahir, but also went to execute the Druze who, inspired by the idea of qiyāma, had started preaching al-Aqim's divinity and refused to accept his successor as Imam and Caliphs, because for them, the qiyāmat meant the end of religious hierarchy, which also included the very theory of imamat, khilafat, and Islam. Throughout history, different Muslim communities, including Ismailis, tried to make sense of their theological doctrines in a political environment, which was not always easy to reconcile, as we saw in this picture or slide earlier. So I'm not going to repeat that. According to al-Mahdi's idea of the Qayyim, here every seventh Imam should have been al-Qayyim, should be the Imam or Imam Qayyim, but neither himself nor his son and all the future Imam and Caliphs were claimed or were believed to be the Qayyim did not align with al-Mahdi's definition of the Qayyim. It's because of this reason that certain Ismaili communities and da'is broke away from their Imams. In other words, it's very interesting and funny to say that the Ismailis, some of them were trying to teach the Imam what Ismailism meant, or they were telling the Imam who the Imam is. It's in continuation of this conception of Imamat theory that the qiyāma declared in Alamut in the year 1164 will make sense, or as I claim. The Ismailis of Persia had supported the claim of Nizar al-Mustafa al-Din Allah, the eldest son of the Fatimid Caliph, al-Mustansir billah, while those at Cairo and Yemen had followed his younger son al-Musta'ali as their next Imam and Caliph. As we all know, Nizar attempted to get the caliphate back, but was captured and executed in the year 1095. After losing contact with the Imam of the time and waiting for some 69 years for Nizar and his descendants to appear, the Ismaili ruler of Alamut, Hassan II, finally initiated the long-awaited qiyāma in 1164. In his first sermon, he claimed to be the Hujjah or representative of the Imam, but later, through different explanations, claimed to be not just an Imam, but an Imam Qayyim. The reason for the declaration of qiyāma have been interpreted by scholars to be many. But it could be understood it has been understood by some as the declaration of political independence from the Fatimids in Egypt, as our own Dr. Dafdari mentions, but it's also could mean that the Ismailis were actually politically independent even during the lifetime of Al-Mustansir to an extent, as again Dr. Dafdari has made this point. Then could the declaration of the Qiyāma at Alamut be seen as a tool, as a could we argue that the Imam used theology as a political tool to claim the imamat for himself, since he was considered to be the son of Muhammad bin Buzurg Gumid? There are two reasons why this could not be the case. First, because Hassan too was already believed to be the Imam promised by Hassan as-Sabbah, as narrated by the Persian historians such as Juwayni himself. Second, because Hassan declared the Qiyāma after 2 years of his leadership, it's unlikely that there was very much resistance to his position as a ruler, although our colleague here pointed about a opposition at Alamut as well. This is further supported by the fact that before him, 3 dais had already ruled successfully as the representative of the Imam. However, the fact that he was mysteriously murdered after 1.5 years after the Qiyāmah does raise some important question about the causes as well as reception of the Qiyāmah among Ismaili communities. One possible reason that I could think about the declaration of the Qiyāmah, therefore, could be the frustration of the community who struggled in a hostile socio-political environment for more than 69 years without knowing the identity of their Imam. The declaration of events like the Qiyāmah, be it Imam Qayyim or representative of the Imam, not only gave hope and higher socio-political religious status, but also gave them a sense of fulfillment for the long-awaited prophecies that were made earlier before the Fatimid Empire. It's only by fulfilling these eschatological events that the Imam Qayyim take his community in direction and towards a new goal. The installation of Al-Mahdi as the first Fatimid Caliph, as we saw, I'm not going into these details, but let's go to this last presentation, the last slide. So what I would like to conclude here is that there appears to be stages or sequences, as I said at the beginning of the talk as well, which led to the declaration of Qiyāmah throughout Ismaili histories. And these happen when Imams are first in concealment, be that a physical concealment or a spiritual concealment. The physical spiritual concealment could be the time of Imam Jalaluddin Hassan, as our colleague already said, the Imam is physically present, but there is no conversation on the Qiyāmah. But his spiritual identity remains hidden in the case of Al-Hakim and Jalaluddin Hassan. Then the stage for the appearance. Now here it could also mean a physical appearance or like a spiritual availability of the Imam for his murids or his followers. And then when the Imam appears, the Qiyāmah is sort of declared. But as soon as the Qiyāmah is declared and then the next Imam come or take charge as the next Imam, then they either have throughout history suppressed Qiyāmah adherence, or they have tried to reinterpret it to make sense of their own authority within the community. So this is here I would like to conclude by just saying that the Qiyāmah at Alamut was one such event in the longer history of Ismaili theology, and it would be interesting now to look at the broader Muslim, especially Sufi, historical, political, as well as theological backgrounds, which had similar, more or less like similar experiences and events. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.